You've probably heard someone complain that the weather is, like, bipolar today.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Right, like it's sunny in the morning and then it's pouring rain by lunch and they just toss the word out there. Or maybe you've heard someone casually describe their everyday mood swings using this heavy clinical terminology.
Like feeling grumpy before their coffee and then happy afterward.
Exactly. But I mean, what if I told you that turning this very serious clinical diagnosis into casual slang is actually masking a really profound condition?
It really does. It completely minimizes it.
Yeah, and it's a condition that actively tricks millions of people, and honestly, even their doctors, into thinking they're just having, like, the most productive, incredible month of their entire lives.
Right before the bottom just completely falls out.
Exactly. So for our deep dive today, we are cutting through all that slang. We are going to unpack the true clinical reality of bipolar disorder.
Which is so needed right now.
It is, and we've got some great sources today. We are working through comprehensive clinical data and some modern care models. Specifically, we're examining a framework titled Coping and Healing: Navigating Bipolar Care in Georgia.
That's a fascinating source guide, by the way.
It really is. So our mission today is to figure out the actual mechanics of this condition. We're going to uncover the highly surprising psychological reason why it so frequently gets misdiagnosed.
That part is always mind-blowing to people.
Oh, totally. And then we'll look at how a modern telehealth framework is actually solving the massive access barriers that keep people from getting the help they need.
Because access is really half the battle here.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump straight into what this actually looks like.
Right.
Because if we want to understand the treatment, we first have to grasp why a bipolar episode completely eclipses what, you or I might call an ordinary mood swing.
That distinction is foundational. I mean, we really have to start there.
So where do we begin? With mania.
Yeah, take a manic episode, for example. The common misconception is that mania is just a really, really good mood.
Like you've just got a promotion or something.
Exactly. But it isn't. Clinically, a manic episode is an extreme state of biological acceleration.
Biological acceleration. Wow.
Yeah, the nervous system essentially shifts into an entirely different gear.
Yeah.
You see an elevated or sometimes highly irritable mood, but it is accompanied by severe behavioral changes.
Like what kind of changes?
Well, we are talking about racing thoughts that the person literally might not be able to verbalize fast enough.
Oh, wow.
Extreme impulsivity and grandiosity.
Wait, let's define grandiosity in this context, because it's not just like regular arrogance, right?
No, not at all.
It's more like suddenly believing you are destined to write the next great American novel over the weekend and just deciding to drain your entire life savings to self-publish it right then and there.
Precisely. That's a perfect example. It is an inflated sense of self-esteem or power that completely detaches from logical consequence.
Right. Logic just goes out the window.
Completely.
Mm.
But physically, the most striking clinical marker of a manic episode is the significantly decreased need for sleep.
And we should clarify, that's not the same as insomnia, is it?
No, and we have to differentiate this. Insomnia is lying awake at night, desperately wanting to sleep.
Right, staring at the ceiling.
Exactly. Your brain won't let you, and you feel entirely exhausted the next day. But in a manic state, the brain simply stops requiring the rest.
So imagine you're the listener for a second. You go to bed at 2 in the morning, you wake up at 4 in the morning, and instead of feeling wrecked, you feel like you just slept for 10 solid hours.
Yes.
You are just vibrating with energy, completely ready to conquer the world. I mean, that isn't a mood shift. That is a profound systemic change.
It is a massive clinical red flag. Your brain is essentially flooded with excitatory neurotransmitters.
But then we have the hypomanic episode, right?
Yes, and that introduces a very dangerous gray area into the diagnostic process.
Because hypo means under or below, right?
Exactly. Hypomania includes those exact same elevated energetic features. Talking fast, generating a million ideas, feeling highly productive.
But the critical distinction is the collateral damage, isn't it?
That's the key, yeah.
Hypomania doesn't cause major life disruption. Like, the person is still going to work, they're still maintaining relationships, they're still functioning.
Right, they aren't draining their bank accounts.
Yeah, they just seem noticeably revved up to the people around them.
Which is why it flies under the radar.
Yeah.
And then, on the complete opposite end of that biological spectrum, you have the depressive episodes.
Which is the crash.
The massive crash. And this isn't just sadness. This is a complete systemic shutdown.
This is a total halt.
Yeah. It is characterized by profoundly low mood, overwhelming fatigue, a crushing sense of hopelessness, drastic changes in appetite,
Wow.
and a severe difficulty functioning in basic daily tasks.
Trying to visualize these extremes, I keep coming back to a radio.
Oh, I like that.
Like, if you think about an ordinary mood swing, it is like turning the volume dial up and down on a radio. You are a little louder, a little quieter, you are happy, you are sad.
Right, it fluctuates.
Yeah, but the music playing is fundamentally the same song. A bipolar episode isn't just adjusting the volume, it is like the radio violently snapping to a completely different station.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
With a totally different frequency, a different rhythm, and a totally different intensity.
That analogy hits the nail on the head because it captures the shift in baseline frequency.
Right.
When the radio station changes in a bipolar episode, the brain's electrical and chemical baseline shifts. And understanding that physiological shift is the key to understanding how these episodes combine to form actual diagnoses.
Because bipolar disorder is not a monolith, right? It exists on a spectrum.
It is absolutely a spectrum.
So how does that spectrum work? Let's establish the baseline with bipolar I.
Okay, so to be diagnosed with bipolar I, a patient requires at least one full manic episode.
So that's the extreme acceleration we discussed, where the life disruption is massive.
Exactly. And it is important to note that a bipolar I manic episode can be so severe that it may even include psychotic features,
Oh, wow. Like what?
like hallucinations or deeply entrenched delusions. It is highly visible to the people around them.
But then we have bipolar II, and I'm curious, if bipolar I includes these massive, highly visible manic spikes, is bipolar II just like a milder version of the same thing, or is it a totally different pattern?
It is a distinctly different pattern. Bipolar II requires at least one hypomanic episode.
That's the less severe elevation where functionality remains intact.
Right, plus at least one major depressive episode.
And this brings us to the trap, the absolute blind spot in the system.
Yes, the diagnostic trap.
Because the clinical data emphasizes that bipolar spectrum disorders, particularly bipolar II, are incredibly commonly misdiagnosed as unipolar depression.
It happens all the time.
Essentially, they are diagnosed as standard major depressive disorder. Why does that happen so frequently?
What's fascinating here is that it comes down to human psychology and the insidious nature of hypomania.
What do you mean?
Well, let's do a thought experiment.
Hmm.
Imagine you are experiencing a hypomanic episode. For 3 straight weeks, you are, quite frankly, on top of the world.
Okay, I'm with you.
You are barely sleeping. You are talking fast. Your brain is making brilliant connections. And maybe you are taking some bold professional risks that are actually paying off.
Right, you feel unstoppable.
Exactly. To you, in that moment, this does not feel like a disease.
Right. If I'm the patient, I feel like I've finally unlocked my ultimate potential. I'm just having the most productive month of my entire life. I'm certainly not going to book a doctor's appointment to complain about being too awesome.
You aren't. You only book the appointment when the pendulum inevitably swings back.
Oh, the crash.
Yes. The hypomania breaks, and the neurotransmitter flood recedes, crashing you into a severe major depressive episode. Suddenly, you're entirely unable to get out of bed for weeks.
That's terrifying.
You go to your doctor and you say, I am severely depressed.
But you omit the hypomania.
Entirely. Because, to your mind, that wasn't a symptom. That was just you having a great month before this terrible depression hit.
Wait, so the doctor only gets half the data. They hear crushing depression, they naturally diagnose major depressive disorder, and they prescribe a standard antidepressant.
And this is where the misdiagnosis becomes actively dangerous.
Danger how?
Prescribing a standard antidepressant to someone on the bipolar spectrum without the presence of a mood stabilizer can act as a chemical slingshot.
A chemical slingshot?
Yes, it can launch the patient directly out of the depression and shoot them straight up into a severe manic episode.
Wow. Wait, so if the patient is essentially hiding half the story because they don't recognize it as a symptom, how is a licensed clinician ever supposed to spot the difference?
This is exactly why a 15-minute quick turnaround consultation is never enough for a complex psychiatric diagnosis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A highly trained clinician has to be an investigator. They cannot just take the presenting symptom of sadness at face value.
They have to dig deeper.
They have to actively hunt for the hypomanic history that the patient is actively overlooking. They will ask highly targeted questions. Have there been periods in your life where you felt unusually energetic for days at a time, where you didn't need to sleep and your thoughts were racing? It requires a thorough, nuanced conversation to bypass the patient's own blind spots and tease out the full timeline.
Okay, so let's assume the clinician successfully navigates that trap. They play detective, they uncover the hypomanic history, and they correctly identify the bipolar disorder.
Right.
So, what does this all mean? What happens next? Because trying to treat a condition that violently swings between these extremes sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, and it requires what the clinical consensus calls a dual-engine approach.
Dual engine.
You absolutely cannot rely on just one single intervention. Evidence-based treatment requires the combination of specific medications and highly targeted psychotherapy.
Let's unpack the medication side first. These are prescribed by a medical provider, and the standard approach relies heavily on mood stabilizers. We are talking about medications like lithium, valproate, lamotrigine, or atypical antipsychotics. But what are these actually doing in the brain? Are they just numbing the patient so they don't feel the extremes?
Not at all. Numbing is a massive misconception. Think of a mood stabilizer as a chemical governor on a powerful engine.
Okay.
Without getting too deep into the neurology, these medications work to regulate the flow of neurotransmitters. They ensure the brain's chemistry doesn't rev too high into mania or stall completely into severe depression.
So they set limits.
They physically narrow the variance of the mood swings, establishing a biological ceiling and a biological floor.
So if we build on our earlier analogies, the medication acts as the guardrails on a dangerous mountain road.
Oh, I love that.
It physically keeps the car from flying off the cliff when the conditions get steep or treacherous.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. But here's the catch. Guardrails do not drive the car.
Right. If you have guardrails but no driving skills, you are just going to crash into the sides of the road all day long.
Exactly.
You survive, but it's a brutal ride. And that is where the psychotherapy comes in.
Precisely.
The clinical models specifically highlight CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and interpersonal and social rhythm therapy, which is abbreviated as IPSRT, and also family-focused therapy.
Yes, all three are vital.
So these therapies are basically teaching the driver the actual skills to navigate the twists, the turns, and the sudden weather changes of that mountain road.
And I want to drill down into IPSRT for a moment because mechanistically, it is fascinating how it addresses the specific vulnerabilities of bipolar disorder.
Go on.
This condition is not just about mood. It is deeply intertwined with a person's circadian rhythms and biological clocks.
Wait, really? How so? You mean like their actual sleep-wake cycle?
Exactly. For someone with bipolar disorder, an external disruption to their routine is often the specific trigger that launches a chemical episode.
Like what kind of disruption?
Let's say you decide to pull an all-nighter to meet a deadline at work, or you fly across a few time zones. For someone without the condition, you are just groggy the next day. But for someone with bipolar disorder, that sudden disruption to the sleep-wake cycle can biologically spark a manic episode.
That's wild. Just one all-nighter.
Yes. The brain misinterprets the lack of routine sleep and hits the gas pedal.
So IPSRT is actively training the patient to manage those biological rhythms.
Yes. It focuses intensely on stabilizing both biological and social routines. Because a mood-stabilizing medication cannot force you to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night.
Right, it's just a pill.
And it cannot manage the stress of a sudden argument with a spouse. IPSRT helps the patient recognize that maintaining a rigid sleep schedule, eating at the same time, and managing interpersonal stressors are not just good habits.
They're essential.
They are literal medical necessities to prevent the episodes from sparking in the first place.
Okay, so we have the clinical blueprint mapped out. We understand the biological extremes, the detective work required to diagnose it accurately, and this dual engine approach of chemical guardrails and behavioral driving skills.
It's a robust model.
It is. But here's the harsh reality of the American healthcare system. Having the best clinical blueprint in the world is essentially useless if patients cannot actually access it or afford it.
That is the tragic reality. The geographic and financial barriers to specialized mental health care are staggering.
Yeah.
The best care model does nothing if it stays locked inside an academic textbook or confined to a few wealthy zip codes.
Which brings us to the real-world application of this. Let's look at how modern medicine is actively attempting to break down these exact barriers.
It's really encouraging to see.
The source material provides a fascinating case study in Georgia. It's a practice called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
Yes, CHC.
They operate as a 100% HIPAA-compliant telehealth therapy practice. And rather than just listing what they do, let's examine why their specific model is so crucial for a condition like this.
Well, if we look at the geographic barrier first, historically, if you lived in a rural area and needed a clinician who actually specialized in nuanced treatments like IPSRT,
Which we just learned is super specific.
right, You are looking at a massive logistical nightmare. You might have to drive 2 or 3 hours each way just to see a specialist.
My gosh.
If you are in the middle of a severe depressive episode where you can barely get out of bed, a 4-hour round trip is a physical impossibility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because CHC's telehealth model covers all 159 counties in Georgia,
All of them.
meaning a patient living in the most isolated rural farming town can open their laptop and access the exact same culturally competent care as someone living in a high-rise right in downtown Atlanta.
And that phrase, culturally competent care, is vital.
Why is that so important here?
CHC has a diverse team of over 15 licensed therapists. We're talking licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, licensed marriage and family therapists.
LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs.
Exactly. That broad scope of practice matters immensely because bipolar disorder rarely exists in a vacuum. It almost always brings along comorbidities and collateral damage.
Right. If you've blown through your savings during a manic phase or severely strained your marriage, you are going to be dealing with profound anxiety or relationship trauma.
You absolutely are.
CHC isn't just treating the clinical bipolar diagnosis. They are handling couples therapy, family therapy, teen therapy for ages 13 and up.
Yes.
They cover anxiety, PTSD, grief, and severe stress.
Furthermore, returning to our dual engine model, the therapist at CHC actively coordinate care directly with the medical prescribers.
Oh, that's huge.
It is. The therapist who is teaching you the driving skills is in direct communication with the doctor who is installing the guardrails.
That makes perfect sense.
That cohesive, integrated approach is the gold standard of care, but it is remarkably rare to find it functioning seamlessly in the real world.
We also have to talk about the cost barrier because, you can have telehealth, but if it costs $300 an hour, it's still inaccessible.
It's still a wall.
CHC has structured their financial accessibility in a way that shifts the paradigm entirely. For Medicaid patients, the copay is $0.
Zero.
Zero. And for major commercial insurances, they accept Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Humana. The coverage brings sessions down to a highly manageable $10 to $40.
Let's pause on that because a $0 copay isn't just an administrative benefit.
What do you mean?
It is a clinical intervention in itself. Chronic financial stress is a massive documented trigger for mood episodes.
Oh, of course.
You cannot ask a patient to manage their social rhythms and reduce their interpersonal stress if the mere cost of their therapy is bankrupting their family.
That would just cause another episode.
Exactly. By removing the stress of high out-of-pocket costs and the logistical nightmare of long commutes, you are actively stabilizing the patient's environment. You are removing the external triggers so the internal healing can actually take root.
It's treating the ecosystem around the patient, not just the symptom.
Beautifully said.
For anyone listening right now who might be recognizing themselves or a family member or a friend in this conversation, and you are located in Georgia, we want to make sure you have this actual resource.
Yes, absolutely.
You can connect with Coping and Healing Counseling by calling 404-832-0102. You can visit them online at cheattherapy.com or email them directly at support@cheattherapy.com. It is a tangible bridge to this exact level of care.
It is incredibly important to know that those bridges exist and that they are accessible without having to uproot your life to cross them.
So, zooming out and looking at the journey we've been on today, we started by dismantling the casual slang to understand the profound biological shifts of mania and depression.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We mapped out how the highly productive high of hypomania creates a massive blind spot, leading to the dangerous trap of bipolar II being misdiagnosed as unipolar depression.
Which is such a critical takeaway. We explored why a dual-engine approach is non-negotiable.
Right, combining the biological governor of mood stabilizers with the behavioral scaffolding of therapies like IPSRT to manage those crucial circadian rhythms.
And finally, we saw how modern telehealth models like CHC in Georgia are actively dismantling the geographic and financial walls that keep people from getting help.
It's incredible progress.
I want to emphasize to you, the listener, that whether you personally navigate bipolar disorder or not, taking the time to understand the mechanics of this condition is how we build profound, community-wide empathy.
Absolutely.
When you recognize that these severe mood shifts are not a moral failing and they are not a lack of willpower, but rather a complex biological and psychological reality, you actively help dismantle the stigma in your own community.
Empathy really is built on understanding. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today.
Okay, I'm listening.
Something that really struck me when we were breaking down the clinical definition of hypomania. We defined it as a person barely sleeping, talking incredibly fast, taking massive financial or professional risks, and feeling absolutely on top of the world with their own productivity.
Right, the classic hypomanic state.
If that is a recognized clinical psychiatric symptom of a larger disorder, we have to ask ourselves about the environment we live in.
Oh, this is interesting.
How often does our modern hustle culture actually praise and reward those exact behaviors? Think about the tech founders or the corporate executives who publicly boast about sleeping 2 hours a night and taking reckless, impulsive risks to get ahead.
Wow. Yeah, they are idolized for that.
Exactly. By unconditionally praising those behaviors in our society, are we accidentally masking the very mental health conditions we should be treating?
That is a deeply unsettling but absolutely necessary perspective to consider.
It really makes you think twice,
Right.
especially the next time you hear someone looking at the clouds and casually mentioning that the weather is acting bipolar today. The reality is so much deeper, so much more complex, and ultimately so deserving of our full understanding.